Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt like you were too much, too loud, too quiet, too different, too something that made others uncomfortable? Have you ever changed the way you talked, the way you dressed, or the way you laughed just to make other people feel more at ease around you? Have you ever said sorry for having an opinion? Sorry for taking up space? Sorry for simply being exactly who you are? If yes, then this story is for you. Once upon a time, in a quiet village built along the edge of a wide blue lake, there lived a young man named Felix, a man who was different from most people in the village, and everyone around him knew it from the time he was a boy. He laughed louder than was considered polite. He asked questions that made people uncomfortable. He wore bright colors when the village preferred gray. He cried at beautiful things and refused to pretend otherwise. And as a boy, the other children teased him. And as a young man, the elders called him strange. And slowly, without even realizing it was happening, Felix began to apologize. He apologized for laughing too loud, for asking too many questions, for his colors, his feelings, his opinions. And he made himself smaller every single day, folding the edges of his personality inward until he fit the shape of what the village expected. For a while, people seemed more comfortable around him, but Felix was miserable. He stopped painting because someone once called his style odd. He stopped singing because a neighbor told him his voice was unusual, and he stopped sharing his ideas because every time he did, someone in the room would sigh or look away. One morning he looked in the mirror and realized he no longer recognized the person looking back at him. He had apologized himself into a stranger, and that same afternoon he walked to the far side of the lake, where an old painter named Iris lived alone in a small, colorful house that the village had always found eccentric and unnecessary. Iris opened the door before he even knocked. She looked at him for a moment and said simply, "You look like someone who has been erasing themselves. Come in." And Felix sat at her table, surrounded by paintings covering every wall. Wild and colorful and completely unapologetic in every single brushstroke. He told her everything, the apologies, the shrinking, the mirror, the stranger looking back at him, and Iris listened without interrupting. Then she stood up, walked to her wall, and pointed to a large painting of a tree unlike any Felix had ever seen, its branches twisted in strange directions, its colors bold and unusual, looking nothing like the ordinary trees outside. "When I painted this," Iris said, "3 people told me it was wrong. They said trees don't look like that. They said I was doing it incorrectly." And she looked at Felix with calm and steady eyes and added, "But this tree is still here, and the people who criticized it have long forgotten they said anything at all. The world will always have an opinion about how you should look, how you should speak, how you should feel." Iris continued, "And if you spend your life adjusting yourself to fit every opinion, you will one day arrive at the end of it having never once truly lived as yourself. You will have been 100 versions of what others wanted, and not one version of what you actually were." She looked at him honestly and said, "The people who are meant for you will not need you to be smaller. They will find your loudness alive. They will find your questions interesting. They will love the colors." And Felix was quiet for a long time before he said softly, "What if they don't come?" Iris smiled and answered, "They won't come looking for someone who has hidden themselves away behind 1,000 apologies. They can only find you if you are actually there." Felix walked home slowly that evening, feeling those words rearrange something deep inside him. And the next morning, he picked up his paintbrush for the first time in 2 years. He painted loudly, he painted strangely. He painted with every color he had always been afraid to use in public. When he hung it outside his door, some people frowned. Some walked past without looking. But one young woman stopped and stared for a long time. And then she turned to him and said, "I have never seen anything so honest." And Felix smiled. Not the apologetic smile he had worn for years, but a real one. Week by week he came back to himself, slowly and without apology. He laughed when things were funny. He asked the questions nobody else would ask. He wore his colors, and the people who were right for him found him, because he was finally there to be found. So, my friend, if you have been apologizing for who you are, folding yourself into shapes that fit other people's comfort, while your real self gathers dust in a corner, hear this today. You were not born to be convenient for everyone around you. You were not made to be easy to digest. You were made to be real. And the right people will never ask you to make yourself smaller. And the ones who do were never meant to be your people in the first place. Stop apologizing. Start showing up. Because the world does not need another person pretending to be less than they are. It needs you exactly as you are. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Tailies with English, where every story helps you learn English and learn life.